This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best comic book podcast for regular comic fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two holiday spirits. They have chains and whips, and they look very excited. Brian Murray.
Ho, ho, ho.
And Danny, host of the Next Issue podcast.
Are we like the spirits of Rihanna or something? What's going on?
It's if the Muppet Christmas Carol met Rihanna. That's what I'm going with there.
I'm good with that.
Okay, cool. Well, you're both very hot, and that's all I'll say about that. The end of the year is coming up. And I just want to remind everybody that our Goodreads Reading Challenge ends on December 16th. If you haven't updated your list, I'm reminding everybody, go do that now. Make sure that you get that list finished up. And please be honest, read all the books, have a good time. And if you finish the list, you can help us pick the book that we're going to talk about as the book of the month for January here on the show, as well as that will be the first book that we read for the Goodreads Reading Challenge starting next year. And the first book that we read as a group on Goodreads. It's a really cool thing. There's a lot of amazing books on there, 24 incredible books that we're asking you to read, so please go check that out. There's a link in the show notes for that. But let's get into the show. I have two legally mandated questions that I've got to do, and since we had so many technical difficulties, we're just going to jump into it. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Danny.
Well, I've been doing very well, actually. I will say I've been watching a lot of movies and not reading as many comics. I guess not more than I need to. Like, there's a certain number that I need to for, like, to talk about them in videos and stuff, but, like,
Sure.
man, it's been a busy time with the movie. So, like, yeah, my AMC Stubs membership is getting worked every week.
Nice,
getting your money's worth.
That's
yeah,
right.
dude.
Yeah. But as far as comics have been great. We are spinning into the holiday season. So the first book I read is to follow along with my reading, my top of the pile from last week is Batman Santa Claus Silent Night #1. Which is not the DC anthology for this holiday. That's coming out this week.
Okay.
This is actually a 4-issue miniseries written by Jeff Parker with art by Michelle Bandini, colors by Alex Sinclair, letters by Pat Brousseau. In this book, the Dark Knight partners with the not-so-jolly Saint Nick, and Santa Claus is coming to town. It's great.
This is insane. Okay, keep going, please.
No, this is really good stuff. Saint Nick has to hit Gotham to investigate some brutal crimes leading up in the days leading up to Christmas. What manner of men or beasts could have committed such atrocities? And the best thing is that, yes, Santa Claus is canon to the DC universe.
Okay.
Confirmed, maybe first. It's not. I don't think it's a first appearance, but if you want, if you're one of those key issue, buyers where they confirmed it right here, right now, which is the reason I picked it up for many reasons, including the Dan Mora, the cover.
Yeah, understandable.
Dan Mora also worked on Claus with Grant Morrison, so like very similar looking characters, but also very distinct in some aspects.
Nice.
There's a cover where Dan Mora did the design for his Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
And I compare it to the Claus design, and it's like, wow, this dude, like, even though they look very similar, like there's so many differences because they're completely different characters, really. But it's really fun. As I mentioned, Santa Claus is real, and we find out in this book that he was one of the people that trained Bruce Wayne on his journey to become Batman.
Awesome. Hell yes.
That was the reaction I wanted from both of you.
Yes.
So excellent.
So Batman's training is just half ninja, half Santa.
Yeah.
Another thing that's very charming, I think Jeff Parker really did something fun here. Every time Santa Claus addresses someone, he addresses them by their name and also their childhood address. Like,
what?
Yeah. So like he knows
Santa's just out here. He's just out here doxing people's parents.
Yeah. He's out there doxing people. And it's really fun because like all the Bat family, they're like, Damien's like, hold on, Santa's real? Hold on a second. The boy that was raised by the League of Shadows can't believe that Santa Claus is a real thing. Yeah, so
and
really
his
cool.
father personally knows him.
Yeah, of course. Although, if there's one person that's going to know him in the DC universe, I feel like Batman is a good one. Of course, another one is Satana, because Santa Claus is magic, and so is she. So she shows up to help, and we find out that Santa Claus has to fight some evil vampires that have been sent by an evil entity But these aren't your regular vampires. They only have one big fang instead. It's different. It's different.
Like on the side, or
No, no,
is
like it's in the
right in the?
middle, kind of like a gopher. This is
Well, that was
Fucking
okay.
bucktooth vampires.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So my last note just says instant holiday classic. So
For sure.
I can't wait. The next one comes out this week. I'm very excited for it.
Wait,
But
there's more of these? This isn't just a one shot?
no, it's a 4-issue miniseries. So yeah,
Oh my god.
there's plenty of story to tell.
So this is
goes-
going to be the perfect gift for collectors next year when you want to get someone like an interesting Christmas book or something, or a holiday book. You get them the collected edition of Batman / Santa Claus Silent Night. I like
That's
this.
right.
This is
That's
good.
right. And Night with a K, of course, because
Of course,
DC doesn't
of course.
mess around.
Of course.
But that was a lot of fun. But Brian, how have you been? How comic books been?
I've been pretty good. Haven't done a whole lot of comics reading because not for any good reason. Like Danny, I'm just bad at this. But I did manage to find time to sit down and read Life is Strange, Forget Me Not #1. It's written by Zoe Thorogood, with art by Claudia Leonardi, colors by Andrea Izzo, and letters by And World Design. If you've been listening to the show for a while, I'm sure you've heard me talk about Life is Strange before. This franchise has been living rent-free in my head since 2016. Originally a video game, but they did put out a comic series that's sort of like, I mean, it's based on the game, on one ending of the game. It's one of those things where like the game could go in a handful of different directions depending on choices you make. So you'll always find some folks who are mad and saying that this is not the real story.
Oh boy.
But Forget Me Not picks up after a possible ending of the most recent game in the series, Life is Strange True Colors, which follows our main character, Alex Chen, who spends her time in the sleepy town of Haven Springs, Colorado, trying to solve the mystery of her brother's death and expose the villainous mining company responsible for it. This comic picks up immediately after the resolution of that, when Alex and her girlfriend Steph have left Haven Springs to go on tour as their I don't know what genre of music they are, actually. I was going to say punk band, but that doesn't feel right.
Folk punk is what I got out of the feeling for some reason, but
maybe I just have punk on the brain because they did bring back Chloe Price from the original series for this book. And she is your classic punk with a heart of gold.
Gotcha. Well, Danny and I also checked this book out because Titan gracefully gave us an advance copy. I don't know if it came out already, but we did have a copy of it laying around.
It comes out on the 13th. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it comes out when this episode drops. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, taking a look at this book, I have no idea about anything in the Life is Strange like universe or story. But I got this book. I thought it was pretty straightforward. I'm sure that there were characters and people and references that I didn't pick up on or whatever, but there was nothing about this that made me feel like I was lost. I kind of got the gist of most things. But I don't know, Danny, what did you think about this?
Very similar. I think I want to say that the only other Life is Strange stuff was another book that maybe we read for like a Goodreads challenge or something. Maybe Brian might have even recommended that.
Maybe.
I'm sure I made you read it at some point.
Yeah, because I remember not Alex, Chloe. I remember Chloe. At least the characters look familiar, but kind of like with when I read the Hack Slash book that's coming out, I also have never read any of that, but I felt like I think Zoe did just a really good job of like making sure I could come in and kind of just go with the flow. And you know, we've been reading comics for a long time, so like it's not unusual for us to kind of jump into the middle of a run. And this felt very similar to that, right? I didn't, although there's a lot less Wikipedia entries for the specific comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I really liked it. The characters was like, oh, this looks like fun, and then it got weird, and then it got kind of sad. And then
that is the Life is Strange experience, my friend.
That's how I've understood it to be.
It's fun, it's weird, it's sad.
yeah, but it also looks beautiful. Like I really like, especially when, like I said, I don't know exactly. I guess when the characters are like kind of manifesting their powers or their abilities, there's like some coloring behind them. It almost feels like they're about to like go Super Saiyan or something, like the early stages of that.
Yeah. Alex's power, I don't remember if it's explained explicitly in this book or not, but her power is that she can read the emotions of other people,
Right.
and that manifests as a colored aura around them.
Interesting.
So blue for sad, red for anger, and so
Okay.
on.
Gotcha. So we a lot of blue in this
Yeah,
issue in particular.
Yeah, and I really liked how they showed the fact that like sometimes a person's thoughts will like spill over when she's reading their emotions, and you got that when she was reading her girlfriend Steph.
Yeah.
When you started to see like little bits of like Steph's own self recriminations as she's sort of like beating herself up in her head.
Yeah. The cool, like it was almost like a collage of images, just kind of like in the background. And then also with another character, the manifest power is also very similar. Like everything just kind of spills out onto the page very chaotically, with our characters just kind of in the forefront of that. So I thought that was very cool. So I'm really on board with this book, even though I've never played these video games and I've only read one other comic book about this.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if, because they introduced Lily as this new character who has the power to take away someone's memories. So I'm a little part of me is wondering, like, are we going to dig into where superpowers come from in this world? And I think probably not, but it's always been like something in the back of my head that's just like, hey, how come this random girl can rewind time? Are we ever going to talk about that? No? Okay.
Because that's the premise of the first game, right? Or the first couple of games, right?
The first game, yeah.
Gotcha. And so I guess having read any of the other comics, I'm assuming you've read some of them other than this before, Brian?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, or does each one kind of feel like it's adding more to the series? Do you feel like it's just like little side stories just to kind of like, I guess I also add to the series, but maybe not answer questions, just kind of like be a little bit of extra content for diehard fans?
Yeah, I think I only ended up reading the first, I think 3 or 4 volumes out of 6 for the original series.
It's only.
Yeah, I like that Brian says that like it's not a lot.
Yeah.
That's like maybe 24 issues or something.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. This takes that story takes place when like Max has broken through into an alternate reality, basically, where Chloe and Rachel have both survived, because most of the first game is keeping Chloe from death. Girl dies in every episode of the game.
Oh jeez.
I'm pretty sure that's the one I read too, because it sounds familiar. I know there was like a hurricane or something that she chose not to stop to save this person, or maybe the other way around. Either way,
wait, you could stop a hurricane with time travel powers? Is that what I just heard?
Well, they go into kind of like it's the butterfly effect explanation, where like when she saved Chloe's life with her time travel powers, she caused the massive tornado to come wipe out their hometown.
Yeah.
Okay.
When she did that, Ashton Kutcher rolled into town, and then a hurricane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ashton Kutcher came into town and personally killed everyone there.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I guess Brian, as someone who's a big fan of this series, or someone who's at least dedicated a lot of time to reading the comics and playing the games, how did you feel about this book? At least from the get go.
I thought it was great. I think Alex and Steph's relationship is something that I'm invested in. I think they're both great characters, and I think they're both good for each other. Steph has a hard time expressing her emotions, and Alex cannot help but read them.
I see.
So, I think that'll be fun. I think the book mentions this a little bit, but they don't really go into a lot of details. But Alex grew up in the foster care system after her father basically abandoned their family and her mother died. So she connects to this character, Lily, who is couldn't be more than 10 years old, who they just find in the street. And my first question is, well, why don't you just like call the police or something? Why are you just taking this kid on tour with you? But then I thought about it, I was like, well, Alex grew up in the foster care system, so she knows exactly how bad that can be.
Right. There was a line in the comic too where one of them asks, we don't know what she's running from.
Right.
Yeah.
which is it's one of those nebulous kind of things to consider. Like, if we call the cops, are they just going to take her back to the situation she was trying to get away from?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot there. So I it's interesting to get that context that that character also grew up in the foster system, because that adds a lot more color to the situation.
But enough about me. Let's talk about you, Mike.
Oh, okay. Well, I have been busy watching movies and watching YouTube videos because I decided to start on that 4-hour H Bomber guy video about plagiarism. And it turns out it was all I could think about until I finished it. So I've been watching that. I saw Godzilla -1 yesterday, which was really fun. I went to the IMAX showing. Beautiful movie. I left the theater feeling a little bit deaf. It was so loud, because the movie definitely doesn't amp up any of the volume in like a natural way. It's like complete silence and people talking, and then all of a sudden Godzilla's on screen screaming and knocking over 1,000 buildings. And while that all looks really cool and in the moment it's awesome, I definitely jumped multiple times, not out of any kind of scary moment, just because the sound suddenly got me, right? But yeah, go see that movie. It's pretty awesome. I'll never be able to get the Godzilla theme out of my head that is paired with, there's like this old rap song from like the early 2000s
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it uses the Godzilla theme.
Go watch Charlie's Angels and you'll know exactly what Mike is
Oh yeah,
talking
it's also
about.
in Charlie's Angels.
Mike, before you go on, I just want to intercede on that, the loud sound of the theater. So you're of a certain age because I bought earplugs that I take everywhere with me in case I go
Smart.
somewhere like super loud.
Yeah.
Now that was before these AirPods. The AirPods are also pretty good at noise cancellation, but I was like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm old enough that I probably should start protecting my ears when I go to loud places.
Well, the problem is you should have been protecting your ears for years.
Hey, maybe I'll go back in time and butterfly affect it.
Yes. But anyway,
But then
outside
Ashton Kutcher's gonna come kill us.
no way, Danny, please. But yeah, before we anything else that's wild, I did sit down and read a couple of comic books. As much as I want to talk about my Pokemon Go woes for this past week, I did read some comic books. I read Swan Songs #5. This is by W. Maxwell Prince with art by Alex Ekman Lawn. The title of this issue is The End of Anhedonia, which is a word that I had to look up on the internet because I'd never heard of it before. But from Wikipedia, I learned from the plagiarism video that you can't just pull stuff. You have to at least cite it. So I'm citing Wikipedia. Anhedonia is a diverse array of deficits in hedonic function, including reduced motivation or ability to experience pleasure. And I think the way that this issue in particular approaches this specific topic is the main character, who we really never get a name for. I think we do, but it's not important. He just doesn't feel like anything's interesting. He like starts on page 1 like nothing's interesting anymore. I do these things that I know that I enjoy, and they're just not interesting to me. They don't give me any kind of excitement. I don't know if anybody else out there can relate to that, but I certainly can. So it was a very interesting issue to read, because at the end, I was thinking from the start that by the end I would be even more depressed, because W. Maxwell Prince does one thing very well that I can always count on, which is tell an extremely depressing story. And that's not like he's out to get me or make people's hearts break all the time, but 9 times out of 10, when I'm picking up an issue of something that has W. Maxwell Prince on it, I'm gonna feel a little bit worse off than what I started. But that's why we read these types of things. The surprising part about this issue is that I found that it did have a positive ending, and I like that the book has this double negative in its title. The end of anhedonia. If hedonia is this idea of experiencing pleasure, anhedonia isn't. So the fact that this book takes on this idea of this man experiencing this extreme depression of some kind, specifically around just feeling numb about everything all the time, and goes into his psyche to try to analyze what that is through hypnotherapy, which is a bonkers idea, but the book kind of just rolls with it. And of course, getting Alex Ekman Lawn on this book, who I'd never heard of before, was maybe the best choice that this series could have made. I don't know if W. Maxwell Prince is out there handpicking artists for these anthology books that he's doing, but holy shit, I don't think anybody could have done better. And I love all of the other artists that he's worked with. He's worked with some crazy artists that have done very wild work. Like Martin Simmons, for instance, was on the first issue of this series. Great. I think Martin Simmons would have been garbage in this issue, because Ekman Lawn nails this like really bizarre dreamscape thing of which is a mix of multiple art styles but also collage, but a skeuomorphism on like photography and so many things that like I really can't explain it to you. I mean, I have the book in front of me. We're live on Twitch. If you're not watching this on Twitch, I don't know what you're doing with your time, but I can show you like we've got pages that are just like traditional comic book art, right? And there's this really interesting thing that he does with like outlines of art on top of art, right? Like the background isn't really the same kind of art as the foreground. And he also does, but then he does these other things where like this character Albert, that's his name, this is a massive collage of multiple layers of art put together in magazine clippings. And I don't know if Ekman Lawn drew this themselves or what, but like this book just does stuff that like you can really only ever do in comics. And like I freaking love this so much. I'm so glad that I have a physical copy of this book because it's beautiful to look at. I'm very mad that my local comic book shop gave me the variant cover. I really wanted the original cover. If you see that one, which is like holes inside of a man's head, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of those things that I see and I go, oh, I should get that as a tattoo on my body. It's so fucking cool. It's a beautiful issue overall. I think like you could go pick this up on its own, have a really good time. This series is a wonderful anthology. So like you don't need to have read anything else except for the next issue is an Ice Cream Man tie-in, because of course it is, because that's how W. Maxwell Prince operates, and I'm so fucking excited. But yeah, this issue is incredible. I feel like this is the perfect artist for this dreamscape story, as this person is slowly but surely driving into the root of what they believe is their actual source of frustration and anhedonia. And W. Maxwell Prince knocks it out of the park. It's a beautiful issue from start to finish.
Yeah, I've also really been enjoying this series, and funny you mentioned the cover, because I actually picked up the cover where you see Albert and his inner child in the front of the cover, because that was the part of the book that I clung onto the most, and they made me I was like, I want this one. The first one's very jarring. It's beautiful, but it's also very jarring.
I love it.
And yeah, this anthology has been so much fun. Like each issue, I think my favorite issue was the last one, at the end of a sentence. But this one was also very good. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll probably reread everything once we get the last one. This is probably my favorite work from W. Prince. Even though I love Ice Cream Man and I love Haha and like pretty much Art Brut, like dude doesn't miss. He doesn't. He just doesn't miss. So.
Tying it into the Ice Cream Man cinematic universe.
I mean, the fact that I didn't even know that Haha number 6 was going to be an Ice Cream Man tie-in, and I was like, okay, yeah, there is a greater universe at play here, and Nick and I can't stop but trying to machinate on it every time there's a new volume out. So, yeah, anyways, this series is fantastic. In particular, though, this is maybe the best issue of the series so far. Probably one of the best things I've read from W. Maxwell Prince, and I really love all of his other stuff. So highly recommend Swan Songs number 5 if you can get your hands on it. But let's bounce back over to you, Danny. Let's talk about another book that you've been reading.
Well, Mike, this week we got the start of a new Sentry book. The Sentry number 1 came out from Marvel Comics. Okay. This was written by Jason Liu with art by Luigi Sagheria, colors by Arthur Estley, letters by Joe Caramagna. Now, as you may or may not know, the Sentry, Robert Reynolds, died during The King in Black. Noel just like split him apart. So going into this book, I was like, okay, how are we going to get there, right? So in this book, we'll find out who will be the new Sentry. The Sentry's dead, but ordinary people all over the world suddenly manifesting his powers and experiencing snippets of Bob Reynolds' memories. Will one of them survive long enough to emerge as the new Sentry, or will their newfound power destroy them? When Misty Knight and Jessica Jones cross paths in search of answers, they open an investigation that will change everything you know about the Sentry. This book checks out a lot of boxes, right? We got Sentry shenanigans that I'm always on board for. It's such a weird character.
He's like a cancer in the Marvel universe, where they were like, hey, look, here's a fun idea, and then like no one at all knows what to do with him.
Yeah, so I think this is probably a fun way to possibly bring back the Sentry in an interesting way. I almost want them to do like a Captain Planet thing, where like all the people that are manifesting his powers have to get together and call him back.
See,
Uh,
but the twist would be that they put all their stars together and then the void comes out, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
that'd
the
be
big
cool.
twist on this series, right?
Um, but also somebody's hunting all these people to kind of consolidate that power. So there's a lot more that we don't even know about that. And then of course
Okay.
teaming up Misty Knight and Jessica Jones to like investigate all this. Like who better in the Marvel universe to like look into like this really weird stuff than those two? So
Totally.
yeah, really fun stuff. I did not expect to enjoy this as much as I did. But I'm glad that this book is out and I kind of want to follow it along because I forget how much I like the Sentry until I read another book that's Sentry related, which is pretty meta because that's kind of his power. Like he's made people in the Marvel universe forget about him.
Forget about yeah.
So it's wild. Yeah, go read. There's there's like 3 or 4 one shots called like Sentry and like X-Men and Fantastic Four. Those are really fun, but this one's also very good.
Okay. I mean, at this point, the only amount of engagement that I want to have with the Sentry is listening to that Horse the Band song, but that's a whole other thing. But anyways, Brian, why don't you tell us about another book that you've been reading?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Godzilla -1 earlier. My next book was a Godzilla book.
Hell yeah.
This is Godzilla Aftershock. This is written by Arvid Nelson, with lines by Drew Edward Johnson and colors by Alan Pasalacqua, I believe is how that's pronounced. This is the back half of what they call the Monsterverse Titanthology.
Hell yeah. Like, why not?
Yeah. The first half is a King Kong story that I haven't gotten around to reading yet, but I fully intend to.
Mm-hmm.
This is set shortly after the 2014 Godzilla movie, but it features characters who are like going to go on to be the main characters of the Godzilla King of the Monsters sequel.
Okay.
In this book, we have the Muto Prime, the basically a bigger, badder version of the monsters from the first Godzilla, is tearing ass around the world trying to pick fights with the G-Man himself. Because apparently this thing is like a parasitic wasp and it wants to lay its eggs inside Godzilla.
Totally understandable. You know.
Yeah. Which I thought was an interesting twist. The way they got there didn't make a whole lot of sense, where they were like, see, this cavern is just like this other cavern, because it's not actually a cavern. It's the hollow left by a decomposed Godzilla body.
Okay.
So
there were previous Godzillas is the implication there?
Yeah. I don't know enough about geology or biology to say if that's how that works or not.
Yeah.
It felt like a bit of a stretch, but then again, this is a Godzilla book. So.
The concept of the hollow earth also doesn't fully align with real world geology.
Reality.
Yeah. So I would say just I wouldn't worry too much about that one.
That's a good point. Just gotta relax, let the giant monsters flow over me.
Right.
Which unfortunately I think works a lot better in film or in any other like animated medium.
Sure.
But I don't want to say that this book was like bad. I think that, it was well written. I think the art looked great. They did a good job of like giving Godzilla expressions instead of just making him look like a giant lizard. I just think that you lose so much of the impact of these movies when you're just staring at a still image.
Sure. Yeah, Godzilla's humongousness, I guess, and like the way he moves is a core part of the Godzilla creature and franchise, I think. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And like the sound design in those movies is some of my favorite stuff. Like that charge up noise that Godzilla makes when he's gonna fire his laser breath.
Dude.
So good. And the roar they have for him is amazing, and you don't get any of that in a silent medium.
Right.
Now, Brian, might I recommend, if you want a little bit more of the action, maybe check out the the Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong book. Once it's all collected, because I'll just sell it to you like this, and this is how I'm selling it to people. You get to see Superman punch Godzilla in the face, and if that doesn't get you in there, I don't know if anything else will. But I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's a good time to be a Godzilla fan with like the movie, the Monarch show on Apple TV, like all these comic books. Yeah, we're thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Have you watched that Monarch show? Is that any good?
It is fantastic. Seeing Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell play the same character in different time, like father and son playing the same character, it's so much fun. On top of like the show also takes place after the 2014 Godzilla movie, and also I guess
Okay.
the timeline of the Skull Island movie. And those are two of my favorite ones from that universe, specifically Skull Island. So like, yeah, I'm really really enjoying it. I'm actually gonna watch the newest episode right after we get done here.
I
Nice.
just rewatched King of the Monsters the other day, which is like such an amazing spectacle and such a dog shit movie.
Yeah.
Like the dialogue in this movie is some of the worst I've ever heard. But then Godzilla comes up and I'm just like, yay.
Yes.
Daddy's
Jangle
here.
your keys
Yay.
in front of me again.
Oh, Ghidorah, let's go.
Isn't that Monarch show? Isn't that the Matt Fraction TV show that
It
he
is.
worked on? Okay,
Correct.
cool. So if you need a comic book tie-in, folks, I just did it for you. Go watch Monarch. It's based on work from a comic creator. I want to shout out Paul G in the chat really quick, who complimented me on my sweater. If you're not watching at home, I'm wearing a very cool Christmas X-Men sweater. So thanks, Paul, for that. I appreciate it. Let me talk about one more book really quick, and then Dana, I know you've got one more too. So I read a little tiny comic book, and I mean physically little tiny, called Wolvendaughter. At least that's how I'm pronouncing it. This is by Ver from Quindry Press. This is a funny little book that I got as part of not funny at all, actually. It's totally not a funny book, but it's a comic book that I got as part of a Kickstarter from the Quindry Press. They did this, hey, support us and we'll give you 4 or 5 little mini comics. They're like 48 pages long. And so far, the handful that I've read out of the 3 that I've read out of the 5 have been pretty good. This one is by far the best one that I've read, and it's unbelievably good. Like probably one of the better comics I've read in the past couple months, honestly. Especially as something that's a one shot that gets you ramped up with everything that's going on and ends on such a satisfying, interesting story beat. But basically the idea of this book is the story follows a young girl who becomes a chosen, quote, daughter of what is only known as the Beast. The Beast is this huge 4-legged monstrosity who's wreathed in flames and hell-bent on destroying many, if not all, of the towns and villages in the land. We really don't get a lot of definition there. We just see that this beast kind of goes from village to village destroying things, and the daughter kind of shows up as almost like a Silver Surfer to Galactus style relationship, right? Now, she is really not into this. She really doesn't like that she was chosen. She really is against what the Beast is doing. But there's this kind of, you have to understand the reasoning behind things. And I don't want to completely spoil the book because it is really short and it's a really fast read. But it ends in such an interesting, sort of sad but satisfactory way that I was just like floored by the fact that all of this was contained within 48 pages inside of this little tiny book. It's like a quarter sheet sized comic book. The art by Ver in this book is incredible. I feel like there are single page there's a single page like here of just this giant beast monster on fire. As it's the fire kind of just lives inside of its body. We get these really wonderful moments with the character, the daughter, who is like just really torn emotionally about what's happening and what she's supposed to do. Like, I'm telling you, this book is just absolutely gorgeous.
As metal as all hell.
Dude, it's so cool. It almost makes you think like the Burninator is coming, like that strong bad bit from way back in the day. But like there's so much emotion and there's so much heart in this book, and again, to contain all of that in this really tiny 48 page comic is incredible. If you can get a copy of this, I'll put a link to this in the show notes. It's totally worth your money. I cannot wait to back more books from this Quindry Press if they do more on Kickstarter. But yeah, Wolvendaughter totally rules. I love this book from beginning to end. Yeah, that's all I can really say about it. But I just the art in this book just floors me every single time. Like there are just these pages of just absolute destruction that are happening. And it's like, oh, so well done, so good.
I just went on their website and they have a lot of really cool looking stuff. Like Quindry Press. And it's all very affordable too, like $8 for a book or $4 for a digital, like on most books. Like that's a good deal. Like
£8.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, it is in not
British
not
pounds.
British pounds.
Yeah.
So it's a little more, but either way, like it looks cool. So I think I might get a few of those digital ones to check them out.
Yeah. Yeah, totally worth it, even just for the digital. But if you can get the physical, it's a nice little book to put on your shelf. However, it is like thin. It's like a single issue comic, so it doesn't really fit inside of a bag and board exactly. Kind of feels weird to put on your shelf. So if you're a wild person like me, you can go to PAX Unplugged and you can buy a full little zine shelf that a guy is selling because you've bought so many Morkborg and Cyborg zines that you don't know what to do with them. And this guy says, hey, you bought a bunch of these things for me. Why don't I also sell you this other thing that's $60? You can build it when you get home, and then you can put all your zines on your table because it doesn't actually fit inside the nice Calyx bookshelf that you thought because you don't have to do mental measurements. Like, that's also an option. Just throwing that out there.
I want to go to IKEA with Mike. And just watch him freak out over like nothing fits anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Listen, if we hit $50,000 on Patreon, the $50,000 that we earn, I'll take somebody, whoever has donated the most to Kickstarter or to IKEA. Anyways, Danny, I'm going to shut up. Tell me us about one more book before we get into the top of our pile.
Well, all I can think about is the little meatballs at the end of the IKEA now, but I'll try to get through this last book. The last book I read, the last book I'll talk about because I've read too many. It's BRZRKR Fallen Empire, and I have this really cool foil local comic book cover that I picked up. This is the Jenny Frison cover, but it's black and white. Oh, it's just in grayscale. I know, I love foil. I'm such a dumb kid from the 90s that any foil comic will like I'm in. Yeah, exactly.
Danny's the reason they're still making those things.
Yeah, for sure. And the reason like all these trading card companies are still in business, like Mike just pointed out to his
I just pointed
cards.
my nice Venusaur that I got up here that you can see.
Put foil on anything. And we should do IRCB foil cards of the host.
Mm-hmm. Totally, dude.
So this book is written by Mattson Tomlin, who also wrote the script for the Batman movie. So if you like that, you'll probably like this, or Batman Imposter over at DC. This is from the book from Keanu Reeves, and artist by Rebecca Isaacs and colors by D. Cunniffe. In this book, we see the lone survivor of Olus, a long dead empire that once thrived, tells a tale of BRZRKR's distant past and the death of Cataclysm he brought forth. If you like a book that is just super violent, BRZRKR is the book for you. I just love that every once in a while they're releasing these one-shots after the series now that it's over. And because this character, it's pretty much the Eternal Warrior, right? He's been around forever. So you can really put him into any time era and he'll fit. And you can just tell this cool little violent story. Now, the really cool thing about this one is that it also is it's kind of a mystery of like who is still around to be telling this story since BRZRKR killed everyone in that empire, and then also what led to the fall of the empire. Because BRZRK B, as they call him B, and that's such a weird nickname for it because it doesn't fully identify how violent this man can get.
Sure.
But he doesn't just go around killing people for no reason. So there's gotta be somebody did something to him to kind of make all this happen. Once again, maybe he's the Ashton Kutcher of his time. So Ashton Kutcher's gonna end up on the episode name, and I don't think I can help it. But it'll be good for the algorithm.
Just the Ashton Kutcher of his time. That's gonna be the episode title, I'm sure.
But yeah, big fan of these one shots. Boom, keep putting them out like every couple of months, every quarter. However, I'll keep revisiting this until they eventually make the movie, because I know that's the reason Keanu Reeves is attached to all this.
Oh, of course.
I'm sure they're not being very subtle about that. But I'm on board. I love Keanu Reeves too. So give me more BRZRKR.
Sure. I was going to say, I'm wondering when this movie is going to get announced. Like maybe this was something that got caught up in the writer's strike and stuff, and maybe we'll see it next year or something. But I mean, they're ready. They're definitely ready to keep putting out content for this IP. So I don't know. Well, let's take a quick break here. I think we should do that. I think my cat is in desperate need of attention. If you can't see it on the screen here,
you see you're staring at the back of your head. Yeah, I caught that.
Yeah. And she just wants some food. So we're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, we're gonna talk about what's on the top of our pile, and then just wrap this little show up real quick. So we'll be back in just a second. wrap up this week's episode of IRCB, we're going to jump right into everyone's favorite thing, the thing that people always tell us they love the most about I Read Comic Books, and that is top of my pile. This is comic books that you've been meaning to read, an old book, a new book, something that's just been sitting on your shelf, and you finally want to get to it. We're going to talk about it. Before we get into our picks, though, there's some folks hanging out with us live, and that is mostly the folks that have been hanging out with us live on Discord. The Discord is a wonderful place that you can check out in the show notes if you haven't already been there. Tom, though, is reading Wasted Space Volume 3, which I'm very excited to hear Tom's actual finishing of this series, because I have a lot of thoughts, and I feel like they don't align with most people. So, Tom, let me know what you think. Paul G is going to be reading Jeff Parker's Blighter, Tracker of the Realm, and CK is going to be reading Paul Jasley's favorite book, Monica. CK, I can't wait to hear what you think about that book, because it is out there. It's wild. And I loved it as well. But let's jump into things. I probably should also say, because I've got a little bit of housekeeping that I should do at the top of the second half of the show every time, which is you can always follow us on the internet, on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Discord. We've got Goodreads. We've got all that stuff. So please go check us out over there. We've got a YouTube channel that Danny runs. It's amazing, full of really cool clips and bits and pieces from the show. And as always, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. You can get access to things like the IRCB Movie Club. We have an episode dropping very soon that should be it's going to be all about Old Boy. If you haven't seen that book or seen that movie or read that series, you should go do that and then subscribe to the Patreon so you can get access to that. Plus, we've got Giant Days of Our Lives. We've got a better Batmobile and so many other things. It's going to be a really, really fun time if you go subscribe. So patreon.com/IRCB podcast. But let's get into things. Let's start with you, Brian. What is on the top of your pile this week?
I'm going to do something that I very rarely do, and that's listen to Nick White. The top of my pile is The Forged Volume 1, Operation Black Box.
Mm-hmm.
It's written by, I think I got these credits right, but honestly the credit page of the book was a little confusing to look at.
Sure.
I believe written by Greg Rucka and Eric Troutman, art by Mike Henderson, colors by Nolan Woodard, and letters by Ariana Marr. As the classic movie quote goes, "You had me at buff ladies in power armor."
I mean, that's how it was pitched to me too, so I totally understand.
Yeah. And I read the first few pages just to so I could understand what the hell this book is actually about, because I really did just tune out at buff ladies in power armor when Nick was pitching it to us.
Yeah.
My head went somewhere for that. But it looks like it's going to be the kind of bonkers sci-fi that I really dig, where they're just like, look, we're not going to tell you what T-space is. We're just going to mention it, and you can either get on board or get out of the way. And I dig that. I mean, sometimes you need a little bit of an explanation. Like in Star Wars, we don't need to understand how a hyperdrive works. We just need to know that hyperspace is a thing, and we can pick up what it does from context. And any lengthy explanations like that are just going to have nerds fighting on forums, because that's how I spent the early 2000s.
I see. Well, this is very exciting. This is also on my forever to read list, but Nick has been pushing it quite a bit, so it will probably slowly but surely make its way up to the top as he keeps pressing me on it and mentioning it on the show. So I'm excited to hear what you think about this, because Greg Rucka sci-fi can get very heavy at times, but I've heard that this book doesn't necessarily do that.
This collection is issues 1 through 3, and it's up on Hoopla, so it's pretty easy to get your hands on.
Very cool.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, this is also like a magazine-sized book too, so the art style is pretty cool.
that's the only reason I haven't picked them up, because I don't have enough room for magazine-sized comics.
Sure.
I need to rearrange, maybe get a contractor to blow out a wall in my house or something.
Now, if they slap some foil on that bitch, Danny will make room for it. But
so just a word out there for Image and Greg Rucka and co. Just put a foil cover out. Danny will get that immediately. Put a foil on it. Well, let me talk about a book that I'm excited about to read next. This is Masterpiece #1 by, hear me out, Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev, with colors by Ian Herring. I feel like every year or so I give something Brian Michael Bendis is working on a try. Read into that as you like. The guy's constantly putting out books, and I feel like I try and I don't. But this time it's with Alex Maleev, and that's pretty hard to resist, because that dynamic duo has put out some amazing comic books that I've loved or loved at least enough to keep reading. And so I'm really interested. Plus, the synopsis for this book sounds pretty interesting. It's a very, very lengthy synopsis, which doesn't really bode well for the book, in my opinion. But I found a way to kind of sum it up from Dark Horse's website. Emma's parents were infamously heist-styled criminals who swiped a cool billion from a billionaire, a man named Zero Preston. Preston has been trying to find a way to seek revenge and discovers that while Emma's parents have gone off the grid, Emma hasn't. In order to exact his revenge, he forces Emma into taking on one of the greatest heists of all time. This time, though, it's against Preston's corporate enemy. Emma will have to gather up some of her peers and recruit some of her parents' old friends to pull this off, and it's going to be dicey. And a character we maybe, I don't really know this person, know from other comics named the Paragon will also be making an appearance. I've never heard of this person before, but the synopsis makes me think that it's real or something that I should know. I Googled this best to my ability, and I could not find anything about this outside of like a lone Marvel character from like the 80s. So I don't think it's that character. But anyways, this sounds interesting. Alex Maleev, beautiful art. Brian Michael Bendis can write a pretty good comic book. And so I'm excited to at least try this out from Dark Horse because, you always got to try stuff, right? That's the important thing about comics. Shouldn't get set in your ways. You should be always open to new ideas and new things because you never know if you're going to love something. I feel like every time I try, 9 times out of 10, it's a hit rather than a miss. So you got to at least put yourself out there. Unlike
and
that,
a heist book is a really good sell, a really easy sell too.
I was going to say, I heard heist and I was like, I'm in, let's do this. At least for number 1. Let's see how it goes. If it becomes a bit too much, it might be something that I wait till the trade, but I'm at least going to try number 1. I'm not going to be like that guy on the internet that people have been ragging on recently who's just like, why are people putting themselves inside of Captain America books? And I'm like, bud, the human experience needs to be told through these types of myths and characters, but that's a whole other discussion. Sorry.
I am always relieved when somebody mentions online drama like that and I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, you should probably be thankful. Yeah.
It's just like, oh, thank God, I missed that one.
It was easily an hour-long conversation, like over the phone that Nick and I had. We were watching something, like, co-watching distantly, which is a fun thing to do. But Nick was like, did you see this tweet? And I was like, oh no. Because that's
no good story has ever started with did you see this tweet?
Exactly. And he said that to me and I was like, oh boy. And we literally stopped what we were watching and talked about it for like an hour, and the night just diverged from there. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. Maybe we'll talk about it after we finish the show. Danny, though, tell us about a book that's on the top of your pile to wrap us up here.
Well, before we do that, I'm gonna go rogue since Mike can't stop me and it's live. I just want to mention there are 4 books on my pull list that say Batman in the title next week, and I'm gonna mention 2 because they're really good. Batman City of Madness that Ed Brubaker talked about last episode, along with Paul.
Well, Paul talked about it with Ed, but yeah.
The headline reads better as Ed Brubaker talked about it on the RCV podcast, and also Batman Gargoyle of Gotham. So, and those are magazine-sized books, so that's why I can't buy the Forge because I'm already picking those up.
I see. You've only got room for the DC Black Label stuff on your shelf.
Unfortunately, sorry, Greg Rucka. But the book I'm excited for next week is Moon Knight number 30. This is the last issue of this ongoing series. Now, this series premiered back in July 2021, which I can't believe it's been so long. So this is going to be written by Jed MacKay with art by Alessandro Capuccio, colors by Rochelle Rosenberg, and letters by Corey Petit. The terminal seconds of Moon Knight end. So Moon Knight is going to die, apparently, because if you've seen any advertisement, so you either know that or you don't. Or if you don't know that, you probably don't care that Moon Knight's about to die. But by dying, it just means that next month we're going to get a new series called Vengeance of the Moon Knight. So in order to be ready for that, I want to catch up. I'm actually kind of behind on this series. So I put Moon Knight number 30, but I really just want to catch up all the way to Moon Knight number 30.
Sure.
I really have been enjoying this series, though. It really takes a street level approach to Moon Knight as opposed to some more of the mystical stuff, like what you can read in David Pebos' City of the Dead Moon Knight miniseries that's going on. So Marvel's doing a really smart thing of like, you want supernatural Moon Knight, go read this book. You want street level Moon Knight, then you can read this book. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how he kicks the bucket. And then and then what that means for the next series, which is going to be with the same team. So like I don't know why we need a new series. Why isn't this just the beginning of a new arc? But as we all know, number one sell. So here we are,
I
and
guess.
I'm sure they'll drop. Maybe they'll drop some foil covers. Um, Marvel doesn't do as many foil covers as they should.
No, that's
So
more of a DC thing.
it is a DC thing, and Boom puts out a lot of foil too.
They do.
They do.
Much to my chagrin, because sometimes I just want to buy the regular cover, but they put out the foil cover and nobody wants it, and it's the only one left on the shelf, and I forgot to buy the first issue of The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, and that's the only that I could get, and I don't want to pay $15 on eBay. So
I guess I gotta move to New Jersey to make sure that I can get a foil cover from Boom Studios.
Here's the thing, Danny. You and I will just swap. If you can buy me a regular cover, I'll buy you the foil cover, and we just mail them back and forth to each other. How about that?
We just mail each other books back and forth.
Yes.
That sounds good to me.
I feel like Danny's getting the better deal out of that.
Listen, I'll do anything to get a cover A, and that's a stupid thing to have to say, but like these freaking publishers in their ding ding 9 variants for number 1 issue, so freaking comic book shops only buy 3 of each copy because they're like, well, we want to get all 7 or 9, and so they bought 27 copies of number 1, but they only got 3 of the A cover. And guess what one I want? Just the A cover. I want the one that's going to show up when you Google Moon Knight number 30, and it's that cover. I don't want anything that's like the Scotty Young variant or the foil variant where only his eyes are reflective or something. I don't care about that. I just want the regular cover.
Unfortunately, the only solution is that you add really everything to your pull list, and because that guarantees like what cover you get. But
see, Danny, guess what? I didn't request this cover. I requested the A cover. So I'm not trying to be mean about comic book shops.
So
I understand.
Out your ass, Danny.
Yeah, I guess.
No,
so.
I'm just no. I don't know. That's a whole other shtick. Danny, I'm excited. I'm glad that you're excited about the end of Moon Knight and the rebirth of Moon Knight.
Sure.
I feel like
very sincere, Mike. I appreciate it.
It's always one of my favorite things to do on this show is just to send Mike into a spiral.
We've got to end this episode lest I spiral even further.
We do that, I did want to just one complaint, and this is more of it's just something that kind of annoys me that people are doing already. Like, why are people putting together best of like lists now at the beginning of December? Like, the year isn't over. There's still
why does Spotify Wrapped come out in November?
There's still a bunch of comics. There's still a bunch of movies. Some of the movies that I've watched this year that are the best have been in the past couple of weeks. So like,
right.
Wait till I know everybody wants to click first, but just wait till January and you'll have a more comprehensive list, especially comics, because there's a lot of cool collections are coming out at the end of the year because they schedule them for like the Christmas time when people are trying to buy stuff, and those books don't end up on good lists because I don't know, people just start making them in the middle of December or whatever. So that's my one complaint. So if anybody's watching this and you're about to publish a list, just wait a couple of weeks. You may be surprised.
See, Danny, this is why IRCB is notoriously late on most things, because we don't want to be first lest we become wrong. So if we wait long enough, eventually we will be right. That's the way that I see it. So yeah, we'll put out a best of 2023 in March. Don't worry.
We take the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese approach.
Exactly. I guess with that, we'll wrap up today's show. Next week's show is going to be it's going to be me and Kait and Nick. We're going to be talking about something. There was an idea floating around. I just don't know what it is because I didn't write it down in our documents, so sorry about that. But it's going to be me and Kait and Nick next week. It's going to be really fun. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do our music, and we appreciate that forever. Zander is a very cool guy who likes to have fun, and quite honestly, I can't blame him. I want to say thank you to Danny and Brian for being on this episode. Thank you for watching live on Twitch. You're a fantastic human being. Thank you to Kait for proof editing this episode. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.